Bienvenidos a este episodio muy especial de Red Pill que vamos a hacer en inglés con uno de los profesores de economía y leyes más legendarios que yo tuve la oportunidad de tener en mi carrera, Christopher Lingle. Thank you so much for saying yes. I remember it was 20 years ago, 2004. I was walking into class and suddenly I see the coolest professor that I've ever had in all of UFM history, and it was you with really long blonde hair, like a surfing shirt and your flip-flops. And when you started teaching us, you were so bright about the whole world because you travel a lot and you have this amazing and adventurous life that I've always wanted to know what was the history behind that cool American guy that became this professor in free market economics, but in so many other subjects as well. So thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
How has Mexico treated you?
Wonderful. It was, I don't know what my expectations were, but it exceeded whatever they were. Beautiful architecture, beautiful women, wonderful food, beautiful women. Did I mention beautiful? Anyway, I've enjoyed it completely. I'm in Condesa now. It's a magical place. It's a place I would like to live.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, Mexico City is a great place to be.
Well, I live wherever I am, so that doesn't have a lot of meaning. So I live now in Mexico City. But I will live somewhere else in a few days. So.
What's going to be home after Mexico?
My home is wherever I am.
Okay.
So I came from Bali in Indonesia. I was there for a few months. I was in Argentina before that. So it is wherever I am.
I never could imagine that you've never been in Mexico City because you have been in Guatemala so many times. Like, can you count the amount of times that you've been there?
I started going in 1998, and I went there every year except the year after I was robbed at gunpoint in a restaurant. And I don't know if it's a coincidence or, that I didn't go that year. And of course, I didn't go during pandemic. So I've been going since 1998.
How did you end up in Guatemala?
Giancarlo Ibargüen, who was then the provost, rang me up in Atlanta during the Olympics, 1996. I was watching the Olympics. I wasn't even at home. I don't know how he tracked me down. I get this phone call from a guy, Guatemala? Yeah, well, Leonard Ligio recommended. I said, okay, would you be interested in coming? I said, well, I'll go anywhere, but I can only go in the summer because I'm a full-time professor. And said, okay, I'll get back to you. Well, I took a year off from academics to write another book, which I didn't finish. And then I went to Guatemala for a Liberty Fund colloquium that Giancarlo, he invited me. Yeah. It was ironically, it was on artificial intelligence.
Really? In 1998 in Guatemala?
I mean, that's how advanced Giancarlo is, or was.
Yes, yes.
Rest his soul. And I don't remember anything that went on in that because, it's like, okay, it was a sort of advanced topic that I knew very little about. But after that, I went almost every year.
Giancarlo Ibargüen was one of the most amazing human beings that I've ever had the honor to meet. Yeah. And as the president and every job that he did inside of UFM was incredible. And I will never forget that when he started getting sick from multiple sclerosis, I was starting on radio. I was in 949, and he would call me. He would phone call me, and he would be like, keep doing what you're doing. It's incredible that you're talking about Atlas Shrugged in a music radio for young people. And you would think that you should be the one giving him, like support and like the good feelings and good vibes. And it was all the way around.
Exactly.
And that for me was amazing because he was a human being that had so much inside of him that even though he was slowly dying, he was leaving little pieces of light
absolutely
everywhere.
Amazing. Musa Oyao, who started Francisco Marroquín, told me that he was annoyed that he received a notice from a 14-year-old boy that said, you use the word freedoms. He said, there's only freedom. And it was Giancarlo at 14. So Musso initially said, who is this kid? And So he was always an advanced individual. He was really amazing. It was one of the best things that happened to me at Marroquín is knowing him and his family. Yeah, I'm still in touch with most of the family.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know very well Paula Ibargüen, her niece. And I think that that's important to talk about, like the human connections that get formed behind these economic forums and the classrooms, because that, I think, it's the reason why UFM became such a unique experience for people who were students like me, but also for you that were teaching. So can you tell us a little bit about the human behind Muso Ayao and Giancarlo Ibargüen and the people that you have encountered, which I think is also the reason why after so many decades, you still have this passionate way of teaching, right?
Yeah, being connected with Francisco Marroquín probably is one of the best career moves I ever made. I became semi-retired probably almost by accident in 1998. And so it made it easier for me without a permanent post to be able to come whenever I was invited. I told the story about the development of the university in front of Don Muso at a dinner party one night. He was sitting next to me, and I said, well, look, I'm going to tell my version, and you correct me if it's wrong. And basically, as he finished his university studies, he looked around, and Guatemala was a mess. There were the guerrillas, the Marxists, backed by Cuba. And then there were the oligarchs. And he said, well, that's not the future. He said, that will not allow us all to advance. So he went off to the U.S. He went to LSU for a while, and he was classmates with Don Carlos Montes. And they were good friends. So Muso goes back to the States, and he comes back to Guatemala. And while he was in the U.S., he was at the Foundation for Economic Education in New York, met some guy named Mises or Pride Man, or these kind of strange people. He came back, and he gathers together some of his friends. And he says, look, I want all of you to give me $100 each. He said, what? Why would we give you $100? He said, well, I met these people. They have some good ideas. I'll bring them down, and they will tell us what should be done to make Guatemala a freer society. So he brings down Mises, Hayek, lots of different people. And after a while, his friends said, well, God, this is great. These guys have great ideas, but we're the only ones hearing about it. And he said, okay, give me $200 each. He said, what? Why? He said, I'll start a think tank. He said, what's a think tank? He said, never mind. I'll start a think tank. I'll publish these, translate them into Spanish and publish them and distribute them. So that goes along. That was SES, the beginning of SES, the Centro
de Estudios Económicos y Sociales.
Yeah. I never use, I just know what the acronym, Anyway, so he starts, and he said, this is great. He said, so people are reading. He said, what about our kids? He said, give me $500 each. What? What are you going to do with $500? He said, I'll start a school. He starts a school. He doesn't know anything about schools. He starts a school. So they're going along. It's going great. Muso, this is great. But our kids, they have to go to San Carlos. They'll all become Marxists. So, what? Give me $1,000. What? Why would we give you $1,000? He said, I'll start a university. Are you crazy? How would you start it? He said, give me the money, I'll start a university. So that's Francisco Marroquín. Muso had good friends that trusted him. He had a vision, and he carried it out. And, you and I are both beneficiaries of that.
Yes, for sure. In fact, we're sitting in Universidad de la Libertad in Mexico City, in very large part, inspired by this example of Muso in Guatemala that now it's carried on in Mexico. And I wanna share something that Maria Laura de Salinas, the wife of Ricardo, she asked me, Gloria, I don't get it. In Guatemala, you have UFM University. It's been 50 years of it. You have Libertópolis Radio from UFM alumni like Marta Yolanda, Jorge Jacobs, Maria Dolores. And she's like, why hasn't Guatemala get it? Because we have had, unfortunately, oligarchic governments all throughout the democratic period that started the year that I was born, 1985. And now, after 3 very failed governments of what you would call right-wing, which was Otto Pérez Molina, a military, Alejandro Yamatei, who was in charge during the pandemic and it was a disaster, Jimmy Morales, who was this like comedian, and now finally there is the left, the real hardcore left governing Guatemala. They've been there for 1 year. The country is a disaster. We have had people coming from Guatemala, like 35 of them through the MPS. And they tell me like nothing is working. Not the airports, not the highways, not like there's social struggles everywhere.
All the way to the Pacific.
All the way to the Pacific.
But that,
she was asking me, how come having UFM and having Libertópolis and having this and having that? My answer for what I've seen being a student and also like always collaborating with UFM is that unfortunately, UFM is more respected, more well-known, and way more impactful outside of Guatemala than it is inside of Guatemala because, in part, there was a decision that the UFM would never get involved in politics because that's what poisoned San Carlos University, which was founded by Francisco Marroquín. And the reason why...
The original Francisco.
The original Francisco Marroquín, And Musso Ayao grabs Francisco's Marroquín legacy to take it away from what San Carlos University had become, which was this Marxist factory of people who were super resentful, right? That's my answer. That was my answer to her. I think the mistake is trying to stay so pure that you're always discussing economics and politics only with your friends in the safe spaces, because some people complain about the safe spaces, but sometimes classical liberal ideas have been also like only within friends, right? The Mont Pelerin Society, etc. That was my answer to her. But you have way more experience because you have gotten in UFM since 1998. You have been a professor. You know it from a perspective that I don't. What do you think is the problem? Because now Mexico, having Universidad de la Libertad, should learn from those lessons, right?
Yeah, I think that one mistake is that, first of all, almost all of our students come from the capital. And they almost all, because it's relatively expensive, they are all from the best families or the oligarchic families or the rich families.
Yeah, I never understood that. Azucareros financing this classroom where oligopolies are not going to be taught.
And they also, there's no dormitories. And so the capital of Guatemala, like most capitals, is fairly expensive. So if we had someone from Shela, where do they stay? Well, it's difficult, Of course, students are capable of moving around much more than I am, for example. But I think that's a big mistake. I tried to encourage, and they're now talking about they have some land to build a dormitory, but that's in the future. And we have very few foreign students, which I would have thought, again, many people often ask me, say, I would like to study there. Someone in China or Mongolia. And I say, well, it's in Spanish. And they go, okay, It's not always, but my classes are in English. So I think if we could attract a wider, group of people, it might be more effective. The problem is with the people from the well-off families. If they buy into all of our ideas, when they graduate, they go to work for the family company, and they go over there. There's your desk. Sit down, be quiet, and we'll send you a check. What I was always hoping is that instead of doing that, they would say, I want to be an entrepreneur. Instead of giving me a check, give me the money of startup. And then that's the only way I think we will escape it, because it's, if you buy into the Marroquín line, you don't invite your uncle to your wedding because he's a corrupt public official. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Yeah. It's family. Yeah. And you're never going to discuss these problems of your cousins, involvement in some kind of corrupt activity. So, it's just too tight. We're too close, and family is a big thing. I mean, it's a big plus, but it can be, I think in the case of Guatemala, a hindrance for us to advance these ideas. So that's my reading.
That's a great reading, and that is also a piece of the puzzle, right? Because you won't get involved in the country's politics if your livelihood depends on it.
Exactly.
And if your family has these structures that are part of the system. And what I see, especially in Guatemala, is there's a high resistance to change the system. Yeah. We don't have the case of like Cuba or Venezuela where everything collapsed so horrible that maybe one day there's an opportunity to make things different, right? Guatemala somehow, like, even though the crisis, but it holds itself. I remember Armando de la Torre, the professor also, he was Cuban, and he said like Guatemala was like an airplane that would never crash down, but also would never like lift off. It would like just, go like this. And Central America a little bit like that. Cris, but I'm also very curious, how did you get to these ideas? What's your life story? Where were you born? Did you have family members that were as adventurous and rebellious like you? Or were you the black sheep, or how they call it in your family? Like, what's your background into getting into these ideas? Because I assume that it was not because you had a UFM where you were growing up, right?
No. I often say that I had my personality defect turned into a lifestyle. It began probably in my first year of elementary school. I always resisted authority.
Where were you in elementary school?
I was born in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, okay.
So, and I don't know. I was always sent to the principal, or, being, back then there was corporal punishment, so they would either, hit you in one way. I didn't think that was a terrible thing in my life. Even when I was in the Army, I was sent to see the colonel because I, contradicted one of the officers.
You were in the Army? We will get to that, but let's stay in elementary school. Wow.
So I've always had this sort of resistance to authority. So that made me, I had some sort of fertile ground for being against government per se. I remember I read Atlas Shrugged when I was probably 17, and I thought it was good literature, but I didn't see a message in it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I just enjoyed reading it.
Like a dystopian future.
Yeah. But, it's like, it didn't, maybe I was already there in a sense, but I didn't see that as like a turning point in my life like many people did.
Yeah.
One of the terrifying things I remember in China, and I asked like a young student, says, how did you become sort of liberal to libertarian? He said, when I was 14, I read Human Action in English. I'm like,
Jesus.
I couldn't have read it in English at 14.
Neither.
So these are terrifying people. I mean, these are people like Giancarlo that just have a capacity that you and I would never really grasp. But anyway, so to become, I'm an Austrian economist by accident.
Okay.
Because all of my training and my doctoral studies was primarily with Chicago people. So it was free market, but, and then I went to an Austrian seminar and I said, these guys have some similar ideas, and they seem to have a different vocabulary. I didn't see it as being categorically different. I just saw it like they invented words like catalactics or praxeology. I said, what do these words mean? I mean, anyway, okay, I kind of agree with them. And by then I had some public choice. Some of my professors were also from students of Gordon Tullock or Jim Buchanan.
Oh, wow.
So I had some...
all in Georgia, or you were already moving around?
Yeah, mostly in Georgia. Then I was a professor at Auburn University a long time ago. And so I began picking up these ideas. And then finally, I started as a labor economist. My dissertation was on female unemployment in the U.S. So, when I started living outside the U.S., I became sort of internationalized, and my interests became more diverse. So finally, I wound up in South Africa, and I had a very light teaching load. And I began to, receive books. There was something called laissez-faire books, which was a pamphlet back then. And so and very cheap. A lot of it was Liberty Fund publications. I started reading Austrian economics, and I started ordering them for the library. And the library at my university must have a wonderful collection of public choice, Austrian economics, and so on. Because the librarians like books. And I went in and she said, look, you've already exceeded the quota for your entire department. I said, oh, I'm sorry. I said, no, that's great. He said, I've been putting it in other departments that never order books.
Wow.
So we had fantastic. So I tell people, I said, I'm almost certain that I had the first course in Austrian economics in the entire continent of Africa. Well, that's probably true because not many, and then public choice. So I had courses in public choice and courses in...
Inspired by the courses that you already had in the United States Okay.
And my reading, and so I developed these courses, and so...
and who were your students in South Africa?
Well, I was in Durban, so there was primarily... depended on where you were in South Africa. In my university, it was somewhat integrated. So we had so-called coloreds.
You didn't have the apartheid, so...
Oh, yeah, it was apartheid.
It was apartheid time. I was going to ask you, because growing up in Georgia, having the past of Georgia, and then moving to South Africa, it was like something familiar, I guess?
In a way, but it was familiar in exactly the same way. Segregation in the U.S., when I grew up, in the 50s and 60s, was just in a way like apartheid was. But in the same way, there was this disconnection with the race, but the connection with the individual. So it was again, my human contacts, our maid was an African-American woman. And if I was rude to her, I would probably be more punished than if I was rude to my mother. Mm-hmm. Because it was disrespectful in a different way. And our gardener was black, and I worked with African Americans in the summers, and I had good relations. So there was this sort of superstructure of racism. But most people, and certainly in my family, there was no indication of resentment of other people because of their race. And in South Africa, it was the same way.
And it was both ways?
In South Africa, there was this superstructure of apartheid and separatism. But at least in Natal, where I lived in Durban, there was this connection with... One of my best students was a colored, which is a mixed race, so a mulatto or something like that. I sent him to Cambridge.
Did they ever ask your students, how can you implement free market economics when first... The blank slate is not the same for everybody?
Yeah.
Was that like a topic that would get discussed?
Well, of course,
in
that's what I addressed constantly. I said, look, one of the interesting things about South Africa, when I arrived there, the Marxists had been very clever. They tried to connect apartheid to capitalism.
Yeah.
So
oppressor and oppressed. Yeah.
So if you believe that, then how could you be in favor of markets? You had to be a Marxist. So a lot of students were trapped in that sort of... A lot of my colleagues, Marxist musicologists. All my colleagues were Marxists. I used to go to they had I call it the loony left luncheon, where all the Marxists would, and then I would go and when I would walk in, they would go, him again, because I would challenge their ideas. And
would you get in trouble for that?
No, we were friends.
Yeah.
And that's a nice thing. Most of my career, I had collegial, friendly relationship with people whose ideas I opposed. And of course, they thought I was crazy, and of course, I thought they were crazy on these ideological issues, but we could still be friends. So I was lucky in that regard. I think I never tried to write people off or to try to make them angry by saying, well, that's stupid, which it is, but but I would try to use reasoning. It was great fun for me.
Yeah.
Just, testing out my argumentative abilities and so on.
It's like mental chess.
Yeah. I really like that. So I spent my entire career or time in South Africa denouncing apartheid, denouncing the policies and explaining to them. I said, no, capitalism is about individualism. Apartheid is about separating groups. It's identitarian politics, which we have now. And so it's incoherent to tarnish capitalism by saying it supports apartheid. If you leave it up to individuals, they're not going to accept these kind of restrictions of based on race. So eventually apartheid collapsed. I wasn't responsible, but I feel like I was part of the debate to attack it. The tragedy is that the government that came in was just as collectivist, just as tend towards social democracy or socialism as the previous government, the all-white government, was not corrupt financially. They were corrupt morally because they had this crazy moral idea that blacks, actually, they were religionists. And they looked at the Africans as in kind of a group that they need to be, that God told them to protect them. And so they had this warped idea that somehow keeping them separate would, anyway, I mean, it's a very complex superstructure, but it was wrong.
Sure.
And so, the tragedy is that when you went from this morally corrupt government based upon sort of religious ideas, a covenant with God, to, a majoritarian group, which is completely financially corrupt, much like in Guatemala.
Yeah.
So it was out of the fire into the frying pan, so to speak.
Do you practice any religion, Chris?
I'm a born-again atheist.
How is that, a born-again atheist?
Well, I just keep reconfirming it over time, so I'm sorry. This is just me. I'm deeply touched by people who are religious. I think I'm somewhat spiritual in that regard. I have this, I don't like these sort of aggressive atheists that are trying to strip people of their religiosity. I'm happy, again, I can deal with Marxists, I can deal with Christians or Muslims or Hindus. Equally. It gives people strength, it gives people confidence, it gives people peace. I don't know. I mean, but I don't need it. And so I don't want to take it away from anyone else.
Yeah, because that's the root of liberalism, that you are entitled to believe whatever you want as long as you don't use the government to impose it through an apartheid with religious ideas, or in Latin America where we have the Marxist Teología de la Liberación, where the Catholic priests were Marxists. And, I don't like it when religion is used by, political excuses, right? And I think that it is something brilliant inside of liberalism that doesn't happen. But I ask you because it's been, you've thought all across the world, and you have seen all these examples, and you encounter so many people that I guess it's incredible that by everything that you've been exposed to, you are an atheist yourself, and you are such an individualist, and you maintain these ideas, right?
Yeah, I think, too many of our so-called classical liberal or libertarian friends are either conservative, secretly, or
not so secretly anymore.
Well, I know, Well, but libertarians were born to divide themselves. They're like amoebas. They just sort of naturally find themselves in opposing camps. You give them 20 minutes and they'll find something.
I wanted to ask you about that because you were there, you were alive when this happened. And I think that the debate that now we have with should libertarians support Trump or not, right? And in its time, I think it was, should libertarians support Pinochet or Margaret Thatcher or Ronald Reagan? And I think we should learn from the lessons of the past, right? Because what I see is that sometimes when you support more conservative right-wing regimes, they end up being more oligarchic than free market oriented, even in the economics level. But you have witnessed it all. Do you see any difference from what is happening now? Or do you think it's just something cyclical that every, 10, 15 years, the pendulum is going to swing one way or the other?
Unfortunately, I think you may be right about the pendulum. Now, I didn't think Javier Milei would win. I wanted him to win in Argentina, but I would have bet against it because Argentina, the population, over 50% receive a net transfer from the state. Now, how do you get people to vote against that? Well, of course, the young people, they weren't the ones getting the check, so they weren't aware. And Javier is a mercurial kind of crazy kind of guy, so he appealed. And of course, the Kirchneristas made such a mess of things. How could he not win? except that I was afraid that they would manipulate the vote. So here we have that wonderful success, and I'm optimistic that if he doesn't make stupid mistakes like this cryptocurrency thing that he got caught up in, that he will be an example for the rest of Latin America. I can be hopeful for that. Now, Trump is also a very complicated issue. The good news about Trump is that there are so many forces aligned against him, whether it's the mainstream media, and in fact, many libertarians I know who are spending 24 hours a day attacking Trump. They didn't spend 24 hours a day attacking Biden or Obama, but they feel like he has I don't think he has a greater potential than these other people for making a mess of things, or creating a permanent structure of authoritarian. I mean, the leftist populists like Biden, who promised, just like the right-wing populists promise, someone to get a coalition. I mean, Trump is an invention of the left wing. I mean, it's a reaction against them. Yeah. And I think this is why there's this pendulum. Now, even if he wanted to be a dictator, there are so many voices raised against him that he won't be. So I'm sort of sitting there cautiously optimistic that he will by accident do some right things. Kamala Harris would never have done the right thing. The Kirchneristas that opposed me, they would never do the right thing.
The importance of raising the voice at the exact timing, because in Venezuela, they raise the voice too late.
Too late,
you know? And even living in Mexico, something that I was discussing with my friends is that a positive thing about Claudia Sheinbaum is that she's also a break for Trump because she's not an ally. So it's like two evils that, block each other. So... Yeah,
I think Trump is more stupid than he is evil. But I think that if there is an evil side, there again, I'm confident that there are enough. I mean, if you listen to The View, which is a TV program with these crazy women who are radical. I mean, they're probably a small minority of the U.S. population. They're certainly not the majority of the voters. But I mean, again, one of the things that Trump reveals to us is the underlying weakness of democracy. I mean, democracy allows everyone that's eligible to vote. They're not well informed, but public choice tells us why. So it may be, the Democrats were quite happy for Biden to have expansive executive powers, but now they think it's a bad thing that Trump has them. So it may be a learning moment. Maybe it's like, well, we shouldn't have these expansive executive powers.
Neither.
So, let's come to agreement on that. So the liberals and libertarians and then the left progressives, the woke people, may come to an agreement. I don't think they will, but that would be a hopeful sign. Again, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think what Elon Musk is doing with this Doge or Doge or however you pronounce it, D-O-G-E, I'm cautiously optimistic that this will be a demonstration effect. He may not save a great deal of money per se, but by revealing the stupidity of what government has been spending money on, and the people thinking, well, give up money for my kids in order to support these idiotic programs, there's something wrong with that. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic from the broader perspective. And I keep thinking, I'm waiting. I say, oh, there's stuff about Greenland and Canada and the acquisitions. And Trump is flooding the airways with so many different things. There's something for everyone to hate. But meanwhile, some good things are being done in the background. I think. I'm hoping this.
But what's the logic behind it? Why would you
I don't think there's logic.
Make propaganda out of the crazy stuff and the good stuff? It's like...
Have you ever, New Yorkers?
Yes.
He's a prototypical New Yorker. Bombastic, loud, smarter than anybody, says stuff that he knows isn't true and tries to bully you into believing it. It's a personality, just like Bill Clinton. He was white trash from Arkansas. And so there's predictability. And so what does he do in the White House with interns?
Yeah.
Nobody else would do, but white trash would do that. So, I mean, Trump is the same way. So there, again, you have to listen past some of the rhetoric, I think.
Yes.
But again, maybe it's just the optimistic side of me. I see all the defects.
I wanna get into your optimistic side because you're also an example of great health and great living, and we're gonna talk about that. But first, you mentioned the stupid spending.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that there's no more stupid spending than war. Military war, the war on drugs, the war on borders. And you went to war.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't know that.
No, well, I didn't go to war. I was in the military because of, when I went to university, there was a requirement that you take reserve officer training. Mm-hmm. So the first 2 years was required at my university. And then as I got into my third year, there was a draft to go in
Vietnam.
You would go to probably Vietnam. So I said, well, I'd rather be an officer. So I continued throughout my university career, and I was commissioned when I graduated.
And you already had free market ideas at that moment?
Yeah, well, I probably kind of a conservative with sort of, again, anti-authoritarian instincts. So that's kind of contradictory in a way. And it was things that, again, and then I got sent to the principal and when I was being trained to be an officer. So, yeah, I mean, I was developing. I didn't, these ideas probably firmed up when I went to graduate school, when I began to, again, under the influence of not only my professors, but fellow graduate students who would, knock me about the head and body if I, made some, young people want to be socialist because they care and blah, 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 all that bullshit, And I was lucky that most of my fellow graduate students were not going to listen to that. Yeah. And so if I did stray into that sort of drunken reverie of socialism, I would be, thrashed back into the right path. So I was kind of lucky. I was around the right people. So again, I think most young people, they say, I think Winston Churchill said, anyone who was below 30 and isn't a socialist has no heart. And over you have no brain. Yeah. So I think there's something to that.
I used that quote in my second book, How to Talk to a Socialist. And I said, like, if you really have a heart for something, you put your brain to it and you start studying.
That's a nice,
because if you really have empathy, you're going to go to the roots of the problem. You're not just going to be like, I hate this. And you know what I mean? And so it's heart and mind that work together to find the problems, right? Like you cannot do one without the other. And it's all in the mind, but I think it's important because the thing of empathy with young people, right? I want to know your opinion on this because libertarians and classical liberals are constantly not winning the battle of ideas. And when they do, like with Javier Milei, is a lot of conservatives and religious people with a clear agenda in not promoting individual liberties, but just focusing on economic liberties. That's something that Axel Kaiser, for example, criticized about Pinochet, right? Like they just focus on the economic side. So how do we become cool if when the needed, message, the culture is needing a message to change things. Libertarians are always like cautious and they push to the conservative side, which also I think it's interesting because when I wrote another book about how to talk to a conservative and I was studying Margaret Thatcher, turns out that she decriminalized homosexuality, which was a crime in the UK. She was for abortion. Things that I'm not seeing conservatives in the 21st century pushing. Libertarians, yes, they talk about, the free market of these things. But in your opinion, with all your experience, what is it that happens with libertarians and classical liberals that they're not successful into spreading the idea of freedom? Like Giancarlo said, it's one freedom.
It partly because our argument is based on reason, as you mentioned, rather than emotion. So it's easier to capture people's emotion. So red flags with a, yellow hammer and sickle and all that crap. We don't have that. I mean, we really have to, you have to suggest to people, say, why are people poor? Because they're discriminated? No, they're poor because they don't have a job. I mean, to me, it's that simple. You know, in Latin America, they're poor because they don't have land. Oh, okay, give a campesino land in Guatemala. He's going to have elotes, you know, maybe enough to eat, but not to survive. Yep. He needs a job. Oh, the campesinos, they don't have an education. Well, you don't need an education because Bill Gates didn't have they never finished university. So all the things that people begin to believe keep people poor are wrong, usually. You know, people are poor because they don't have a job. Why don't they have a job? Because the government interferes with the registration of new businesses somehow, or collecting capital, or the taxation, or people. In Guatemala, imagine the wealth that would be recovered if the people in Guatemala that own an apartment in Panama, Miami, or where, if it was repatriated. Why is it outside? Well, the governments chase it away. Yep. People want to have secure future for their family, so they have maybe a foothold somewhere else. So all these, I mean, this is kind of complicated. You've got to sit there and listen to this discussion. Yeah, but what I see is, for example, people now with the woke thing, right? Yeah, yeah. And you have libertarians, bleeding heart libertarians that are like, yeah, these are legitimate questions. People should be free to love whoever they want, as to buy whatever they want, and like it all comes in the same package. Somehow the discussion gets divided inside the libertarian circles, and you are someone that, because you said, like, I have colleagues in all the different spectrums of ideas, that has a lot of experience in how to do this without burning bridges, I guess, right? You know, I don't know if you saw that, but there was a rap song a few years ago of Hayek versus Keynes. Keynes, yes. And there was another against Marx. Marx and Mises, yes. Now, I was more sympathetic to the other side because, I mean, both Hayek and Mises are very square. I mean, you look at them, you say, that's not me. So you're a young person, you know, a guy with a tie and a small mustache, and Marx with this wild hair, you know, that's me. So when I saw that, and I was thinking, I think about how do young people see this? So I think they say, well, I'm for the other side. I mean, and again, the message was meant to liberate people's mind, to bring them into our camp, but I didn't find it very convincing for mine. That's not the way I would do it. One of the reasons I used to have I get long hair now and then, but that was part of this sort of device I had that I felt like it disarmed students a little bit. It's like, this guy's he's like one of us. He's got this sort of... It worked. It made an impact on me. Yeah. You were like the first person inside of Marroquín as a teacher, and I was like, I can be like that, you know? Yeah. Oh, that's cool, because like I grew up in Atitlan, my mom is from there, like always this hippie side, and you were the first person that from that side of my world was inside of UFM. Yeah, I could have gone to San Carlos. Yes. And they would have at least not, if I'd gone with a tie and a coat, they would go, who's one of the... So again, I think we need to be careful in our messaging. I remember years ago, I said, well, why don't we have these flags? He said, we can't. I mean, it's complicated. I mean, our message is somewhat complicated. And we have to, again, going back to this empathy, we have to find the people who claim to be empathetic to the dispossessed, the poor, whatever, and explain to them how they got in that. They're not victims. They're victims of the state, usually. They're not victims of capitalism or capitalists or whatever. They've been victimized by the system, which is dominated by social democrats or crazies, Peronistas, or AMLO or whoever. Chris, we are about to get to the ending of this amazing conversation. I could talk to you all day, but one thing that I've always admired about you and noticed is that you live liberty. It's not just something that it's philosophy. It's not just something that it's economic, and it's embodied in how you look. You have a super healthy lifestyle. You're always active. You're moving. And I think that that's also admirable and very approachable to all generations, because
when you see someone that embodies liberty in all that it means, you know, it means failing, making mistakes, but you've always have had this utmost responsibility, which is what it's needed to be free, for the way that you take care of your health. And I think that when you go into a libertarian convention, you can notice that you're one of the persons that takes care so much of yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I guess I'm selfish. I made a decision early in my life that I didn't want to have children, partly because I thought I would be a bad parent. I love kids. Maybe that's why I'm a professor, because, you know, I still have relationships with former students, and they've become sort of a substitute for children.
Yes. Weak
substitute. And so I never needed to be married, because for me, family, marriage is about family, which is about kids. And so that I always had these sort of, you know, many long-term relationships, but that, you know, were terminated partly because the other party wanted kids and I didn't. But it made it easier in a way to live this lifestyle. So people say, wow, I'd like to live like, you know, so you got to give up your kids and family, you know. Okay. That may be a big step for people. So these were choices I made, and I have no regrets. You know, like I say, I have my former students and I have nephews and nieces that I love, and I'm really good with kids, actually, as it turns out, as long as they're other people's kids.
For sure, and that you can put
dispose
them
of them. Yeah. So I think it's part of a lifestyle choice. And, you know, deciding to be fit, I mean, yeah, I want to live a long time. I don't want to live a long time in a wheelchair or with a walking stick. So I think you need to look after your health. I follow a ketogenic diet, which eliminates most carbohydrates, and processed foods generally. Tough being here in Mexico with all the tortilla, or in Guatemala.
The corn, yes.
Yeah, arroz and, you know, all that. So anyway, and the same in Asia. I always have to have a little bit of rice, but...
What's the diet? What's the country that provides you with the best diet for your lifestyle?
Well, it's up to you as an individual. I mean, they all can. But I mean, if you want to enjoy the local cuisine, you have to compromise. You know, 5 years ago, I didn't compromise. I would do without. But now I compromise. So I'll have a pizza every now and then. But not, you know, once a year maybe. So I avoid... so I want to be healthy. And I think I try to run... usually when I was on Bali 3 times a week with a group. I haven't run since I've been here for a week, but I walk a lot. So I purposely, like yesterday, I walked from Condesa to the Camino Real to meet some friends. Only a couple of kilometers, but you need to do that. Stay active.
Do other people inside the libertarian movement and liberal movement you have inspired into doing something like this? Do they get it? How important? Like for me, is evident that freedom is responsibility, and it starts with your health. It's not only these economic charts out there, right?
I have to say, well, I would like to think I inspire people, but I don't see the evidence. I'm a little bit disappointed among the people who were at the Mont Pelerin Society meeting. And I've known them for many years. And, you know, they're looking their age, frankly. And they're not taking care. But again, if you're married, it's harder to do. It's easy for me to say no.
Well, but it also depends if maybe your partner joins in a healthier lifestyle, right? Like,
of course.
But my question comes because if we want to inspire young people into what means to be free, responsibility, the ability to respond for your health, for your education, it's crucial. And what I'm always thinking is, maybe if in the Mont Pelerin Society you would include a yoga class, meditation, a course about nutrition, like making back the union that exists between mind and body. If we embody that as a movement, where could we go and be more effective into conversations where we could appeal to people that it's not only the economics, but the economics is everything, but specializing in those things, you know?
That would be nice. Again, unfortunately, we're together for a very short period of time, and it's tough to build those things in. Of course, it could be for the spouses, or for the partners or whatever. It would be a hard sell. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with it, but if it was a week-long event, yes. But it's only 2 or 3 days, so I think it would be a tough sell. I would support it, but I don't think it would fly.
Well, hopefully that's also one of the things that I want to do in this podcast in the Red Pill, right? It's getting to know the person, how they unplug from the matrix, what is the lifestyle, what is the inner child that still lives there. Because if you have that story behind and you understand that this is about a human being making choices, then you can appeal to more people. And maybe they're not going to become libertarian or classical liberals, but just like more conscious human beings,
Absolutely.
I think that's what we need, more consciousness in the world. And I really want to thank you for inspiring me since that first day in classroom until now, and for the real example that you are about liberty, and talking here about Giancarlo Ibargüen. He was an amazing influence for myself as well, and I think that understanding those humans that are behind the classroom, it's very powerful. So thank you very much for being here. And I hope that you come to teach in Universidad de la Libertad.
Yeah, me too. I'm waiting.
Thank you so much. See you next time.